You know how I criticized the front page horror games on Roblox in my one video? You know, the one where I talked about how a lot of Roblox horror games seem almost devoid in creativity? Well, it seems a lot of you guys agree with that take. Some of you really agree with my take. Even the people who made the game seem to mostly agree with my take. However, it seems that a lot of commenters decided to say, what about Chain? Chain in Residence Massacre is one of the best Roblox games out there. And well, since I already made a video on Residence Massacre, I guess today I'm making a video about Chain, a Roblox horror game about a guy with a chainsaw. It seems to succeed in a combination of gore, obnoxiously loud sound effects, and being marginally less terrible than other Roblox horror games of its caliber. Chain has successfully fooled players into thinking that it has the potential to change the current landscape of Roblox horror games. Except it doesn't. Everything that Chain has done been done before, and done way better at that. Oh boy, a giant maze where you have to collect items while the monster chases you. Because everybody loves those kinds of levels. And don't even get me started on how the survival mode is literally just the rake but worse. There are games that successfully take aspects of other games and put a nice little spin on them to make them unique. Chain is not one of those games. It's more or less a sloppily crafted, contrived, unoriginal, but superficially entertaining game that uses aspects from much more entertaining games. I'm Breadian, the guy who talks about niche Roblox games, and today I'm talking about Chain.
Why don't we
And,
grab
like,
this bit of
Wayne is
rebar that's
actually
sticking
like
through his
doctor,
head?
like,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Bro,
Dude,
what that
this-
mouths do, I would stick you know what I mean.
God
You
damn.
will see fake pallets if you're going
Ready,
to
and that is liquefied brain.
Okay,
Brad,
that
you
is
just-
what?
You
Thanks.
just ruined my day. You just ruined my day.
Chain starts out with a nicely made cutscene of people being brutally murdered right in front of you. This cutscene effectively does a great job at grappling the player in, and convincing them that the rest of the game will be just as good. Spoilers, it's not. When you try to leave the Minecraft starter house, you hear the chainsaw, and the game tells you to run back inside and hide, even though there's not enough hiding places for everybody. I would say that this little bit here is meant to teach players about the mechanics of hiding, but these little closets are never seen again in the story, so I guess that this is just a massive waste of time. Seriously, what's the point of this? To show us that there's a chainsaw guy? Because we already saw him in the opening cutscene. And I'd say that most people already have a full grasp of what a chainsaw would probably do to you. At least in terms of video game logic. Perhaps the real reason why this part exists is to simply kill off a few people and take away one of their lives. Since once you run out of lives, you're going to have to pay to respawn. What a genius game this is. So after that little debacle, you have to run to a military base. A military base that's been completely destroyed by a single guy with a chainsaw. Like, this was an entire military base, equipped with walls, security, and several light machine guns that are loaded. How did they falter to a guy with the chainsaw? Is he immortal? And if he is immortal, wouldn't the guns at least stagger him? In the old version of Chain, they did have a military base as well, which the developers probably should have cut the military base segment altogether when they decided to revamp the game, as all it does is bring up an unfortunate amount of questions. There's no purpose for this segment of the game to take place in a military base, because all you have to do is just repair generators and call for help. They could have just set the game anywhere else and the objective would still be the same. Just look at Dead by Daylight. Why is my so fucking big? It's annoying, honestly.
Man.
How do I fix this one? Oh, you have the wrench.
Ow!
You can't pick up any of the guns, or use the soldier's armor, or do much of anything. The loaded machine guns serve no purpose other than making you question the game's logic. There isn't a proper excuse for the game being set in this military compound because the setting isn't utilized in a purposeful way. If they were going to revamp the game, you'd think that they would have at least changed a few things around for the better. And before you say, Breadian, he's, like, a science experiment. He's immortal. Guns won't kill him.
Shut your bitch ass up.
That still doesn't give a reason why somebody wouldn't at least try to pick up a loaded machine gun and vaporize him. Maybe if he had a few bullet holes in him that showed that firearms currently don't affect him, it would probably give reason why you wouldn't want to shoot him. If you didn't want people to be bothering with these questions in the first place, then you should have just not included the loaded machine gun sitting right there, considering the fact that I didn't recall seeing any other instances of firearms lying out in the open. It's just kind of annoying. Yes, I know, this is a small detail in the game that can be easily ignored, but trust me, there's a similar but much more damning example coming up. And even if you ignore the fact that a guy with a chainsaw is able to kill all these men, the military base is still terrible. It's a giant maze, where you spend basically 90% of your playtime just navigating. You're just walking around aimlessly, unsure about what to even look for specifically. Players like to be rewarded for their hard work in the form of completing puzzles, or finding new objects that they can use. like a new weapon for example. Chain does the opposite. When you complete the first 2 generators, the game turns into something called a blood moon, which makes the map even harder to navigate as well as making the chain guy even more aggressive. Doors, another Roblox horror game, has a similar mechanic when you have to do the library puzzle, where Figure gets faster as you collect more books. However, in Doors you can hide, and Figure has a clear weakness in the form of his blindness. The Chainsaw Man does not have a clear weakness or evasive maneuver, other than just trying to stay hidden by crouch walking, or just running away with limited stamina, or use dodge frames that aren't going to save you. But the problem here is that if you stayed crouch walking for the entire game, the game would take you like hours because the military base is fucking larger than 5 football fields. Did you even play your own game? After completing all 4 generators, you're tasked with finding a radio, which you will use to call for help, presumably. Yeah. Oh, I found him. Did I hold E? Did I click? Oh my god, we did it, guys. Oh my god. Peachy,
Oh
can you
my
see-
we get to leave?
Cutscene,
Oh
Peachy?
my god. Yo, where is his head, bro? It's just his helmet.
You want to know something funny? Why is there a flashlight just?
We're going to get like
This is just a
from behind.
Oh my god.
Oh, there's
Hold
another
it.
flashlight.
Oh, look
Yo.
at that! Look at that flashlight.
Yo, how is his chainsaw still working? That's all
Pichu,
I'm
can you
saying.
see now? Can you see now?
What a great
No.
fucking
It's
game.
just black.
Oh my
If
god.
we leave now, can we do something else?
Can
This
we
is awful.
leave?
Can we play
Please.
trade?
He must have had his chainsaw on silent mode. And before you say, Breadian, he turned off his chainsaw before he got up to you. I think you're being a little bit too generous with this game. Are you telling me that for the entire game, the guy with the chainsaw was also just constantly having it running, making a fuck ton of noise for all to hear, and then randomly decided to turn his chainsaw off in order to spook you, and also didn't make any noise when sneaking up behind you, and also managed to instantly start the chainsaw completely silently? Only I have it up here.
Oh, it says danger.
Pichu, this might fix it. It might fix it.
It says danger at the
Wait.
bottom of my screen.
Wow, what a shitty game that was. And what's even worse is that this game has some sort of fucking reality distortion field around it. When you ask people for their opinion on the game, they like to say things like, "Oh, I like Chain, it's super underrated." But when you ask them why they like the game, they're just like, the chainsaw was cool. The other modes of the game aren't very special either. I decided to replay the old version of Chain, since it's in the game. And even though I already played through it several months ago, it was forgettable enough that I was able to re-experience it as if I've never played it before. It's basically the same game as before. Find objects in a maze while the chainsaw man chases you. And the survival mode is just the diet version of the rake. Nothing else to really talk about here, except it has the merchant, which is cool. Because merchant, chainsaw, Resident Evil 4 reference? Oh, would you look at that? The title screen actually is a Resident Evil 4 reference. And also uses the same music. My dribbling up. Dude. God, what are you doing?
Hiding so I don't have to do the work, bro. I ain't doing the work. I got lost trying to find where we're supposed to go.
It's not common that I find a Roblox game that legitimately punishes you for playing it. The chainsaw constantly makes loud and obnoxious sound effects. I guess that they thought that it was a good idea to have the chainsaw sound like it's directly behind you, but it's just more annoying because of how loud that the chainsaw and the monster screaming noises are. There are games that have chainsaw killers that aren't loud or obnoxious, like Dead by Daylight or Resident Evil 4. As I just said, it seems like this game legitimately punished me for trying to explore more of it. We pressed on and managed to beat the game, only to be greeted with a cutscene that gave no revelation whatsoever. And in fact, this cutscene literally disobeyed the logic of the game. When I decided to go back and play the old version, for the sake of having something else to include in this review, it was just the same as the revamp. Finding items and having to listen to the chainsaw in my ear over and over again. I was punished for wanting to explore further and see more parts of the game. Chain is a Roblox horror game that will mercilessly suck up an hour of your life and leave you with nothing in return, except a lingering feeling that maybe you should have just played something else. In a way, Chain is a perfect example of a game that you're not really supposed to play for more than 5 minutes, which is a shame because it's sad that we've gotten to the point where some games literally reward you for pressing Alt F4. It's one of those games that have a bunch of buttons on the menu, except 80% of them don't let you click on them because they haven't been added into the game yet. You're only supposed to play it for 5 minutes, watch the cool cutscene, die, and then find something else to play. And by the next day, you don't even remember what you just played. You just remember the name of it and its gimmick. But if you just take 5 minutes and see how Chain stands on its own, and not in comparison to other games like the Hotel experience, then you realize how much of a turd it really is. There are games that I can actually remember a thing or two about after playing it, like Jim's Computer, Light Bulb, Silent Dark, and Faithless. They might not have had gore or loud noises, but they had style, they had an interesting story, and an interesting gimmick that complemented them well. Chain, on the other hand, delivers none of these things. Apart from the gimmick bit, the chainsaw is once again the only reason why people remember this game, apparently. The best part of it is actually the cutscenes. Specifically, the opening cutscene, as it does its job at sucking the player in, and introducing them to the game's main gimmick, the Chainsaw Man, and brutal gore. Other than that, though, it's just a rehash of things we've already seen before. I can definitely see why Chain might be scary to a lot of people, but I see no reason to be putting this game on such a high pedestal. A big question that you have to ask yourself is this: if you're not scared by a horror game, then what else does it have to offer? And the answer to that question, in Chain's case, is definitely not much, and certainly not enough to justify torturing yourself while trying to beat it. Anyways, that just about sums up my feelings on Chain. Can you play this game and still have fun? Maybe, but since the game only consists of constant loud noises and searching for needles in a haystack, I'd suggest only playing the first 5 minutes of it. The rest of the game is nothing but a waste of time. I'm Breadian, and I review niche Roblox games, and that was my review on Chain. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Took some damage.
There it goes.
Oh,
Me too.
it's actually not that bad.
Dude, the wings just shattered. What are you talking about? Oh, inflate, inflate.
What? Don't inflate yet. We're gonna find you inflate this early.
No, I inflated and I'm doing alright.